Hey, it's Benji Cole, son of Al Cole from CBS Radio and host of People of Distinction, the talk that gives an in-depth view of some of the most dynamic, intelligent, and successful people on the planet. Run to our website, peopleofdistinction.org for more info, or you can always email me directly at benji@alcoleenterprises.com. And on the line with us today, we have Grandma. Well, technically her name is Cheryl Van Cleave, but on her book, she's entitled and listed as Grandma, which I personally love because it just makes me think of my grandma. And listen, I'm going to have to call her after we get off this interview. But we're going to be interviewing her with this fantastic book that she has written, and it's called How to Connect with Your Grandchildren During a Pandemic. That's available for purchase through Amazon as well as barnesandnoble.com. And before we go any further, I want to take this opportunity and point out that Cheryl was brought to our network, People of Distinction, today by one of the best advertising firms in the business. And of course, you already know I'm talking about Author Reputation Press. So listen to me. If you're a writer out there, you have worked tirelessly creating your masterpiece. And now you've gotten to what appears to be a dead end because, well, now you need help moving the book you just wrote. Well, I have some fantastic advice for you. People, contact ARP. They're one of the best in the business to do it. And frankly, this is exactly what they specialize in. So you're going to want to head on over to authorreputationpress.com today and gather all of the ways that they're going to help maximize your creative endeavors. And listen, it is an absolute pleasure to have Cheryl here on the line. Now, right there in the title, people, there's no beating around the bush. You understand the conversation at hand, all right? Now, I know, man, listen, depending on where you are, the pandemic is still hitting us in certain degrees, right? And here's another sad part. It looks like it's making a resurgence. Now, that's another conversation in and of itself, but we can think back to that absolutely insane year that we all lived and how everything was shut down, the entire world, it seemed. So this is a remarkable book because it's going to give you insight into one person's journey, one person's experience. But even though we're talking solely about Cheryl's experience, this is going to be relatable. And at the end of the day, listen, Cheryl is the expert. She's written it. It's her life. She's lived it. And she's going to be able to articulate everything much better than I ever could. So do me a favor, sit back and strap in. And by the time we've concluded here today, you're going to run to Amazon and Barnes & Noble and purchase your copies. Cheryl, first and foremost, welcome to People of Distinction, and thank you very much for being a guest. How are you doing today?
I am wonderful. Thank you. Mr. Cole, thank you for allowing me to come on here and to discuss my book. I was trying to find ways in order to see and hear and talk with my grandchildren during the 3 years that we had the pandemic. Mm-hmm. And I tried to think of ways that I could see them, even though they didn't live that far away. I needed to be able to keep in touch with them. And so I thought, okay, there's the phone and we can text, but there's also FaceTime and Zoom. And some of the things that I did were taping them, so like taking pictures or videotaping them when I would FaceTime them on the phone. And sometimes they would say, Grandma, are you taking my picture? And I'd say, yes. And okay. So it was okay because I got to be a part of their life, even though they were doing something. Yeah. Now, I had one girl, Amethyst, who's 9. She would be watching TV, talking with me on the phone, and sometimes put me on pause while she was playing a game, too. But she was 6 then, so 6 years old. She's got me on pause while she's watching TV and texting. So that just shows you how grown up and technologically educated they are.
Yeah.
But that's okay because I still got to be a part of it. Now, Ryan is the oldest. He's 31, and he lives with me. But during the time when we were down, that he worked at Pizza Hut, so he was able to keep working because people had to eat, and they would still go out and get pizza.
Yeah, of course.
But he is one that, even though he's 31, he and I still play hide and seek in the house. He hears me come into a room and he hides. Well, if I hear him come in and I try to hide, I'm not as nimble as he is. And sometimes I'm down on the floor and he has to come help me get up again. Anyway, during the pandemic, it was a lot harder to communicate with a lot of these kids. Now, I was able to see Brody and Wyatt, who would be wrestling or have baseball at the school, but we had to wear masks and sit 6 feet apart. And they even took wrestling outside, and instead of having them inside, we were outside with masks on and 6 feet apart. So I did get to see some sports, but still it was hard to communicate with them. And boys don't text or, they just don't do that much like the girls do.
Mm-hmm.
So they would, they call me or text me, but it was rare. So anyway, with Sawyer, he comes and takes pictures or videos of the sports, and then he has he's behind the scenes in running the film, the projector, the sound, and things like that. So they all have really good ethics and skills and things that they want to accomplish in their life. Brooklyn was one that it just graduated, and she worked at a fast food place for about a year. But she loves riding horses, and she wants to get a horse farm so that she can have a bunch of horses and be out way far away. So, but I want to find out whatever they're doing, whatever they will do. I will go watch her ride horses, or I'll watch the boys play sports. And Amethyst and Dakota were on soccer teams and basketball, and so I went to watch them play. But, out of everything, they all love jokes and laughter. And we only get together maybe once a year. But when we do that, we have a lot of fun. We laugh and play jokes. And the last time we got together last year, we had played minute to win it games. Have you ever heard of those?
I have, yes.
And a couple of them are like, you give them a bunch of paper cups, like 50 of them, and you got to stack them all up on top of each other so that they don't fall down, and then you got to take them all down. You got to beat the opponent. So we always have two. And they're all competitive no matter what they're doing.
Mm-hmm.
And another one is you blow through a straw to move cotton balls in a lane. You go up one lane and down the other, and you're blowing through there trying to do that. Or you use balloons in order to make things go up and down. But the thing is, when it came to my turn, everybody wanted to help me. I had so many helpers that everything went off the table, and of course I lost, but it was fun anyway. The one thing I was going to tell you that is 7-year-old Dakota come to my house last week. And the whole thing is I knew she was coming. Excuse me. And I knew that her mother and sister were coming too. And I was expecting it. But all of a sudden I heard this, FBI, open up, it's a search warrant. And, I knew it was her voice, but I still had all of these goosebumps all up and down my body because it sounded so real.
Yeah.
But that's the kind of stuff that they play.
I love it. Cheryl, thank you very much for all of that. People, I'm telling you, this is something that is forcing me to go through the Rolodex and memories that I have with my grandparents and little games and things that I would play with them. I'm telling you, the relatability of this book is something special, and that's where a lot of the power lies. You might not be able to relate to every single thing that she talks about in the book, but I promise you it is embedded and steeped in realistic circumstances that you and your family, I'm sure, have stories that will be similar. Amazon, Barnes & Noble are where you have to go. Pick up your copies of How to Connect with Your Grandchildren During a Pandemic today. Cheryl, next question that I'd love to go into. Listen, I think what you've done here is fantastic. And it's easy for me to see why you keeping track of your experiences were really important to you. Now, here's the thing, Cheryl, you took it a step further, put those memories into a book, and then published it for the world. Talk to us about what your inspiration was behind doing that.
Well, since I had a bachelor's and master's in special education. I was in teaching and administration. And so I worked with students, and the thing was, I always like to get into what each one is doing. And that way I would try to make them feel special. So I try to do that with my grandchildren, other than say, oh, they're my grandchildren, I don't know what they're doing.
Yeah.
I try to understand. I don't always succeed. But this way I can do a few things with them. And so it started where I had to write reports all the time. And that was always fast. I never really got to put my feelings into anything. And I thought, how can I see them, and other than on FaceTime or Zoom or something like that, because I can't see them in person. So I looked through my computer trying to pick out pictures of the times that I've seen them, and I pulled out pictures and then tried to recreate the things that we talked about at the time. So I wanted to remember them, and then I kind of kept it a secret, and then I had given it to them on typewritten paper. And then I thought, well, after I did that, then I published the book. And when I had the kids autograph them, that Dakota was so excited, can I keep this when I'm done? And I said, yes. Wyatt asked me, well, this will give me a lot of experience for when I'm a pro ball player, and I'll get to autograph my pictures. So they were excited when they saw it. And so then my oldest grandson, Ryan, decided that, well, after I had it published, then a couple other publishers had called me and wanted to market my book, and I thought, oh, I wasn't planning on all that. And he says, Grandma, you got to have confidence in yourself. Well, I do, but I really haven't written a book before. But he says, well, you wrote it. You went through this. You should be able to let other people see it. And okay, but it took some convincing for me to go this extra mile. And so I had thought of writing things before, but the topic was never writing about my grandchildren because I always got to see them. Well, now that I couldn't see them, that's why this topic came up. But I was always interested in true crime because I worked in a prison for 18 years. So I was a teacher and assistant principal. Mm-hmm. But anyway, a boy called It. I don't know if you're familiar with that.
I am,
and
yes.
Dave Peltzer. Yeah. I mean, that was a horrible book, but I know
tragic,
that these things
absolutely.
happen. Yeah. And Elizabeth Fritzl wrote Girl in the Basement because that happened to her where she was held in her father's basement for 24 years.
Oh, wow.
And those terrifying things are, since I work with convicts, those things penetrate because I think how and why. And people get tired of me asking, well, why did you think that? Or why did you do that? But those are the kind of things that I have, and I'm fascinated with the brain and how the brain works. I took a college course on just the brain, and that was a long time ago, and they didn't know as much as they know now. And I'm always want to study things, but I'm running out of time. I'm getting too old to keep learning new things, but I'm willing to.
Thank you very much for that. And the segue that you've established, and you're talking about your fascination with the brain. Well, one can derive from that. I mean, through the brain comes the emotions, right? Or the understanding of different emotions and how things are interpreted. Well, along those lines, I want to now switch gears to your writing process. Any of the listening audience members that are artists out there are going to be able to understand and relate to this next question. So, Cheryl, when it comes to the vulnerability that is encountered with sharing your work, again, it's one thing to comprise this and put it together for your family. The moment you put it out into a public forum, then you leave yourself susceptible to criticism and to comments and judgments. So along with that comes vulnerability. Well, from a writing perspective, Cheryl, how do you handle the vulnerability that comes with sharing your work, especially when it touches on something that is so personal to you?
I agree, and that's one of the skepticisms I had about going public with this. And I had to make sure it was okay with my children and my grandchildren,
yeah, of course,
because they're going to be out there. But I know, like the boys in sports, sometimes they're on YouTube. Like I was watching the news, and then all of a sudden, Brody's wrestling came on, and that was from 3 years ago. And I'm thinking, okay, it's on YouTube, and that, and the same with Wyatt and baseball. That okay. It's not so bad that I'm doing that, although I refrain from using their last names, but I know people have ways of doing that. Mm-hmm. I don't mind the criticism because I worked in a prison, and if you've ever been in a prison, I've been called every name in the book, and I can take that, but don't come after my family.
Yeah.
So that is one of the skepticisms that I really had. If I'm talking about the brain and things that happen that cause other things, like things that are going on in this world now, there has to be something in the brain that is causing them to be like this. And it's, a lot of hate and racism and things like that. But I'm always conscious about my family. And so far, I don't have any dirt on the family that I don't think anybody's, there's nothing bad in there.
Right.
But I know I can handle the criticism. Otherwise, I would not have been able to survive 18 years in a penitentiary. But I hate to say that, but that's one of the jokes. Brody and I were talking one time, and I said, well, we've been talking about, because he was an umpire, I was an umpire. And then I said, you know that I was in prison, right? And he said, yes. And I said, you know that, and he says, well, what were you in for? I said, bad umpire calls. And so it was a joke between us. And then I wanted to clarify, and I said, you realize I worked there and I wasn't an inmate. And he says, yeah, I heard that. So, you know, sometimes you got to clarify things, because otherwise they'll think, oh, Grandma was in prison. So
No,
anyway, I did this so that I can show other people that there are ways that you can connect with your grandchildren other than writing them a letter in snail mail and waiting for them to answer. You can see pictures, you can talk to them. And so I wanted this to get out, but I never knew it was going to get this big.
You know, listen, Cheryl, I love so much of what you just said, and I love what your book symbolizes and what it represents. Listen, people, the educator in her, whether it's in the classroom or out, it doesn't stop, right? Always putting forth a learning lesson there for you to latch onto. My parents out there, my grandparents out there, this is the book for you. Okay? This is going to be something that you just want to latch onto. And again, when you're going through it, why it's so powerful is because it's going to resonate. It's going to connect with you, and it's going to make you drive down memory lane and think about the instances that you've had with your family members, and hopefully it'll make you pick up the phone or maybe get in the car and drive to your grandparents and see them as well. I mean, this is something special. I could sit here, I could talk to Cheryl for hours, okay? I am that much engulfed in what we're discussing. And I have to remind myself, Benji, this is not about you. So you all know where you got to go. I said it before. I'm going to say it again. Amazon, Barnes & Noble. Pick up your copies of How to Connect with Your Grandchildren During a Pandemic by Cheryl Van Cleave. Remember, on the book, she's listed as Grandma. You know, it's something funny here is because you're listed as Grandma, but I see you, well, in your words, Cheryl, I see my grandmother, all right? And I know when our listening audience reads your book, they're going to see their grandmother as well. This book is special. It's pure. It is absolutely magnificent. Head on over there today. Pick up your copies. While you're at it, pick up copies as a gift for someone else as well, because this is fantastic. Cheryl, this has been a true pleasure, an absolute delight. Thank you once again for being a guest on People of Distinction.
Thank you very much for having me.